Good morning, friends and brethren. So good to see you here today, and good to see so many visitors we have with us. We are just very glad that you are here. In a way of explanation, particularly to those who are visiting, today is kind of a report lesson. Just returned from Africa last week and some work that was being done there, and I need to tell you about that. In part, that's what Travis was reading to us about Paul and Barnabas. When they returned to the church that sent them out, Antioch, they came back to give a report. And that's what I'm doing for you today. I've been asked a number of times in the last week, just by acquaintances, people at the gym, where have you been? Well, I've been to Africa. Oh, you must have been on a missionary trip. Well, I'm a little reluctant on how to respond to that sometime. Because, people today, when they think of a mission trip, they think of digging wells or building houses or planting food, gardens, and things of this type, which are all good things. And in poverty-type places in Zimbabwe and Zambia, that kind of help is needed. But I want you to understand that's not what I was there to do. Several years ago, when I was making plans for a trip and was on the phone for several hours with Delta trying to make all the connections work out, trips to Africa just seemed to take a while to plan. Had some dead time on the phone with a little girl that was on there trying to help me out, and she finally said, Africa, that's an incredible trip. I bet you're really excited. Well, yeah, I'm pretty excited about going. I'd already been several times. And she said, is it vacation? Well, no, it's not vacation. I'm going there to work. And she says, oh, this must be a mission trip. Well, yeah, it's kind of like that. She says, are you building houses or digging wells and went and named several things? And I said, well, no, I'm actually going there to teach the Bible. And there was a long pause. And finally she says, wow, that's a great idea. And I said, well, I didn't come up with it, the Lord did. And so I want you to know that I was on a mission, and the mission was to teach the Bible. The question is then asked sometimes, why Africa? And I've explained this to you a little bit before. It's sometimes in very humble circumstances that there's opportunity to teach. Might be in a building or it might be out under a tree. But I'm always amazed that you're always able to find willing listeners. And that has been one of the greatest draws that has taken me back there time and again. And so for this trip, I want you to know some things that we did, some things that we tried to accomplish this week in the trip. Well, first let me tell you about packing bags. This is just not going right, Todd. I'm not clicking. Here, okay, thank you. Go back one. If you think you're confused, I'm already confused. And we have 50 slides to look at here. So, packing for a trip. I take 2 checked bags. Sometimes we pay to take a third one just to carry class materials and stuff like that. Taking things like, our provisions. Peanut butter is important, though I forgot it this time. And teaching aids, pins and paper and power adapters and surge protectors so I don't blow up the projector, mistake one time, and things such as that. And so it's a bit of a job to get everything packed up. We left out on a Wednesday morning. We arrived in Africa, our destination, on Friday afternoon, and we were meeting with brethren that evening. The work gets started, really quick. And as I mentioned before I went, this was a focused trip in Zambia and Zimbabwe, places I've been before, and for the primary purpose of doing some preacher training. And in some ways, I've told you that, some of you, that this was an easier trip compared to most. We didn't spend days out in the bush. We weren't camping. We stayed in town in Livingston, Zambia, and Victoria Falls, Zimbabwe, only about 20 miles apart. And so we didn't have a lot of road time, which is a blessing. And though it was a shorter trip, what's interesting to me, I think I had as much preaching time as I've had on 3-week trips, because we were centrally located. And that worked out just really nice. 2 towns just a little bit apart. Zambezi River splits the town, splits the country apart, and Victoria Falls is right there. If there's a destination, a tourist destination in Zimbabwe and Zambia, it is Victoria Falls. And that's what brings people in. This is still not working here. And you can see that from the air. I'm looking at my picture back here. You can see from the air Victoria Falls here. And we're going to get a new clicker. I told these guys, I sent them an email this week, and I said, if there was ever a time a PowerPoint has got to work, it's this one. And I said, it's like, we just got to get this to go. And they've worked to get everything all set up and go, and then the clicker doesn't work, you know. I told them, I said, if it doesn't work, I said, without the PowerPoint, there's no sermon. And so I said, I got one in my back pocket just in case. But anyway, okay, here we go. And so Victoria Falls, this is from the air about 15 miles out. Just a little bit of National Geographic here, so you understand the area. And you can see the Zambezi River coming through there. And you see that cloud, that smoke that's rising down there. Not really smoke. That's the mist from the falls. The falls is about a mile wide. It's huge. And what they term in Losi, in one of the languages, dialects there, is Mosi Ortunya, which means the smoke that thunders. And that's what the falls is like when you're there and when you're close to it. The mist that comes off of this, literally you wear a raincoat because you become soaked if you're anywhere near it. And this is just one end of the falls is all that we're seeing right here. But it's huge, and it's interesting and wonderful to be able to see that. But that's not really the purpose in being there. Our purpose in being there goes beyond this. And you can see the falls in the distance, the water come down the Zambezi, and the bridge there in between, Zambia on the right, Zimbabwe on the left. But our purpose is more like this. We're there to preach. And on our first day there, what we were able to do is go out into the rural areas to a village there called Jack Matapapa and do some preaching for the day. And as we pulled up, we could hear the saints were already inside. They were singing and waiting for us to arrive. And as we got there and went inside, within about 2 minutes, we were preaching. Tad Corder, my partner, was the first to preach to an audience that was just very willing and ready to hear anything that we would have to preach from the Bible. And so this is Christopher Lachaha is interpreting for me. I don't know why it keeps backing up like that. And Christopher is a really good interpreter, which is a real benefit because a bad interpreter means you spend a lot of time rephrasing everything that you have to say. Now, I'll tell you some more about Christopher here in a moment as we kind of move along. I just want you to see a little bit about a church that meets out in a rural area. At least here they have a building. They had a building for us to meet in. And after I preached for a while and I sat back down, I just wanted you to see the pew that I was sitting on and have a little appreciation for what you are sitting on. Because after you sit on this pew for a while, there's two things that I would say. One is don't slide sideways. And just do your best to get comfortable, but you can't. But nobody complains. It's something that just always amazes me, that nobody complains about what they're sitting on, whether it's just a piece of stick for a bench or if they're sitting on the ground somewhere. And afterwards, outside, I was showing some pictures. Why does it back up? I was showing some pictures of the grandkids on my phone, and that soon led to take a picture of me, which soon led to take a picture of me. And everybody crowded around. I love this little girl down here in the bottom over here, her intensity looking at my phone because she's seeing herself on my phone, am I taking a picture? And not uncommon at all for that to be the case and for that to happen just that way. And part of the joy, why does it back up? I'm clicking.
Put a setting on your PowerPoint slide that's making it do that.
Can you fix that?
I will try.
That's I didn't mean to. And one of the joys for me, particularly in the rural areas, is just being with the brethren and the encouragement that they give me. I mean, we go there to try to encourage and lift them up. But I'll tell you, I think I get more from it than they do. they're always so happy for us to be there and wanting to spend time with us and wanting to talk, and they want to study. I mean, if you go there and you're unprepared to be able to teach and preach, you're in really the wrong place. They're going to be disappointed because their expectation is that you are there to teach them the Bible. As this one elderly sister said one time in a place that we were preaching, we'd been preaching this is our second day of preaching. And as I was coming, I had my backpack on, which was kind of heavy with books, and I was the next one to speak. And it was in this building. And there was just a little aisle that I could make my way through all of the feet, the ones that were sitting on the floor. And this older sister reached up to me. And I thought she just wanted to kind of touch hands as I was walking by. But that wasn't the case. She reached up and she grabbed hold of my hand and she pulled me. She almost pulled me over because my books shifted like this. She was down farther. And she pulled me down and she said, "I have come to be filled." You know what she meant? She wanted to hear teaching. There was a desire for truth. She had a thirst for, "I have come to be filled." And all I could say was, "Yes, Mama, I have come to preach." And I got up and preached. I mean, what an inspiration. And so when you go to places like this, there is that interest, there is that desire that they have, and an expectation that you are there to preach to them. And it was that way just at this place too. But when we were leaving, what was encouraging was this, what you see. They're standing there, we've been talking for a little bit, and it's in the evening, it's time for them to walk home because they have a ways to go. And they are greeting us and sending greetings to you. One of the lessons learned that I would like to share, are we good to go? Okay, good, thank you. All right. Still not. Just hit it. Here we are. Some lessons learned, what I want to share with you in this lesson. Thanksgiving and joy. Here we are among some people that they don't have a lot. Most of them, as we were driving in, live in huts with a thatched roof. They don't have a lot in the way of material things. But when you are among brethren, there is certainly an understanding that they have a lot. They have hope and they have faith that comes in God. They have thanksgiving for the message that's being preached, much like happened in early biblical times, and many who heard the word believe. When we think about what happened in Acts chapter 2, 3, 4, and beyond, there was excitement when the preaching of the word took place. And that's certainly the case here. They were excited about what was happening. Something else, though, that they were giving thanksgiving for. I don't know on this trip how many times I've heard it before, but even more this time, give our greetings of thanks to those who sent you. Tell the church where you came from, thank you for sending you. And that stuck in my mind this time, and I thought, I've got to tell you that. And I want you to know and understand that there are those far away who are, I have no doubt, who in prayers last week and this week are saying thank you for sending preachers to them. And that has just made an impression on me. Preacher training was kind of our focus while we were there. And we started that in Livingston, Zambia. And we were able to acquire a venue there where we could do some of this teaching. And you see there next to me, Christopher Lachaha. He's kind of a local preacher in that area, and he helped organize our studies that were taking place there. And Christopher is very much a mentor for other preachers. He's been a Christian for about 25 years, and ever since he obeyed the gospel, his purpose and intent very quickly came to preach. He has some secular work that provides him a little bit of income, and has no support from any other means. And he does all the preaching that he can do in his spare time. And has become, as I said, a mentor for other preachers and a great interpreter. I want you to see, as someone said, you use your hands a lot when you preach. I don't know if I do or not. But, I've noticed in this picture right here, I've got my hands out like this, and so does Chris. And Chris is one that whenever he's interpreting, he does whatever you do. If you put your hands out like this when he's interpreting, he does the same thing. And if I pick up my Bible like this and I read something, he reads. And if I slap my Bible, he does it the same way. And it's a little bit eerie, but he's very particular about that. And I have come to enjoy and appreciate him very much for his work there. And so this is the venue we're using. We had 26 preachers that were here, some from as far as 70 or 80 kilometers away, who have come for the classes. We had about 5 classes a day, and then ample time for questions and answer too. So we had some long days, but man, they were good days. And that's Tad that's preaching there in that one. Let's go on there. See what's next here, because I don't remember. Serving. Here's another lesson learned I wanted to share with you. Every time when we are doing an event such as this, doing these preacher training, preachers have come from some way. We have to find, or Christopher finds a place for them to stay. He was able to rent a house for just a few dollars where the preachers all stayed. And they just laid out on bedrolls on the floor. And there were some sisters from the church that came and fixed meals for them every day and for us at lunchtime. And this is not uncommon for this to be the case. Don't even try to read that. That's for me, not for you. Just to tell you about this. It is their joy in serving that has made such a mark on me. When I see their, not just willingness to serve, because there's some cultural things there about that, but cultural does not account for joy. That is their excitement about being able to serve in this way. To do this work. And I started thinking about examples. I was coming up with some Bible examples that I could share with you about serving, and then it all turned into just one. To remember Jesus and his willingness to serve in every way. We studied a while back from John chapter 13. This example of Jesus serving, he is teaching his disciples about serving. They had been previously debating among themselves and asking Jesus, who will be the greatest in the kingdom? It was soon after that Jesus wrapped a robe around his waist and he went to serving them, washing their feet. We think about servitude, there is no greater example than that of Jesus and how he served and what he did. And so these ladies right here who fixed food and prepared for us, for these days, were happy to do so. And their means, they didn't have a modern kitchen, they never do. They're cooking outside over some coals. Jolly is fixing some fish for us there. And I got thinking about it later. She could only cook 1 fish at a time, and she had to fix 30. How long it took to cook all those fish, I don't know how long they set out after she cooked them. But best not to think about those things. But it's just the smiles on the faces of these ladies, as they're serving, their excitement to be able to do this. And having a baby doesn't slow you down. In fact, I'd also learned this. If you have a baby on your back, you can feed them just by reaching over your shoulder. It's how she was feeding the baby there, But, this, why does it back up? This joy in serving. I got this quick picture of Jolly here as she was bringing our meals to us. She was the one who would bring it in, and she would always, and I've seen this other times before, where she would come in and she would bow down before us and hand us our food. And is just so happy to serve in that way. And the man on the end there, Brian, you see he's got his hands kind of cupped like this. There is a please and thank you with this. And that's all you do. It's a please and thank you. I've tried to remember to do that when I'm there. I'm not so good at that. But that's always been kind of interesting and an interesting perspective to me. There should be joy in serving. There should be joy sometimes in being served. That's okay too. And so after our days here of the preacher, I was going to show you my food. I eat fish too. And several of you have asked about, did you eat sudza, which we talked about before the trip, the cornmeal thick paste substance of their life there. And we did eat sudza. But on this particular day, we were kind of surprised. Tad and I had rice. They fixed rice just for us. And fish. And fresh fish. It was from the Zambezi, which was not far away, so that part was good. And I cleaned mine pretty well. And but I noticed that the other brothers there, like there's still the head is left on mine. Okay, eyeballs. I don't do eyeballs. there was nothing but skeleton left when they got done, you know. But that's how you eat when you eat with the brethren. It's going to be something like that there. Or at breakfast where we were staying, they had breakfast there provided at the place we were staying, but, you know, not so good. And, I mean, the bacon is not like our bacon, and the sausage just don't even do it. You know, you want to be the next day, too. You want to live the next day, too. And so it was peanut butter and mango jam for us, okay? Serving. This little girl, I've seen this so many times. This little girl is so excited that she is getting to help. And she wants to help do stuff around us, and her job was to sweep the ground, you know. And she did this with such excitement and willingness that was just impressive to me. And I thought about Colossians chapter 3, and you're familiar with this text. You know, beginning in verse 22, the apostle says, "Servants, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye service as men pleasers, but in sincerity of heart, fearing God. And whatever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord." I just wish we'd remember that. That when we have opportunities to serve, it's not in any way to bring glory to ourselves. If that's it, please stop. Our heart needs to be that of serving the Lord in whatever way we can, and doing it with a smile as this little girl was. What a beautiful smile in serving. Let's show you some other things here that happened during our week. Well, here was the guys in our class. Like I said, we had 26 in our first class. And the guy down the bottom, Henry, Speedy is his nickname, is one who converted several of these, including Chris Lachaha, the guy I was talking about earlier. And then there's Amos over here, who was one of our interpreters, who again did a really, really good job. And then finally, Fraser Chills, a guy up there in the top in the corner, he was not a Christian, but was our cook last time we stayed at this place. And I've kept in touch with him. And a little more about him in a moment, but our paths crossed again. So we crossed from Zambia over to Zimbabwe. Border crossings, you never know what to expect. You know, we actually scheduled a whole day because it could have taken that long, but it only took us about 3 hours. Had to go through the COVID line to get everything approved and stamped. We were ready to go, but some in front of us were not, and it took a while. And then going through getting stamped, that took a while too. We had to go back out and get more information 4 times and before we finally got stamped and made our way through. But all in all, we were glad it wasn't worse than that. Sometimes it can be. And so then we make our way on across the bridge we identified sooner, and we get over to Victoria Falls. The next morning we start our classes there. And it's serious time, you know, for these men, who, again, some who have traveled some distance to be there. And here we go. Crossing the border again. And we'll get across that border here in just a minute. And so I can remember what to say about these guys there. Move us up one. There we go. No, move us back one. These guys are serious about being in the class. I mean, there was nobody there who just came for a free ride. Because it's long days sitting and listening and asking questions and participating. A lot of questions. In fact, something that we did more of this time than we have in some classes in the past. Opening up to more questions. Some serious note takers there all the way through the class. And such an absolute willingness to learn. It inspires a teacher when there are good, value-added type questions that are being asked. It inspires a teacher. And so there were 3 days of teaching classes and then preaching here at that same place on Sunday. The one that's interpreting for me, Short Mapande, is a very close fellow worker there that I've worked with for 16 years. And was really glad he was able to be a part of these classes and helped organize these and interpreted well. I mean, was able to interpret because he does such a good job, you know, with that. And so we were able to, again, have this opportunity, sharing some time, I don't want to say in a social way, but lunch is being fixed again by the ladies, this serving that's taking place by them. And even if you're in town, just notice that a lot of the serving takes place outside and the cooking takes place outside. There's no fancy stove on the inside for them. And the men can do some serving too, and washing hands is kind of a traditional thing. There's no soap. It's just water. I'm not sure how much good this does, but I do it. It seems like you're doing something before you eat if you wash your hands, even if it's just water. Breakfast was just tea and bread for the preachers, and at lunch we had sadza and chicken. And Peter Medinda is the guy I'm sitting next to, who works here in this area a lot. And the discussions continue right through our lunch period as though we were still in class. And Peter is another one that I have a lot of confidence in. Peter and Short work together throughout this region, the Binga region. And each of them work with a lot of churches out in the bush regions and do a lot of work there. Good men of faith. We took a day where we went down to a village called Lukosi, which is about a 2-hour drive to get us there. But I didn't mind the drive too much. 2 hours on the tar road, as they would say. A drive where you have to be careful and cautious because through this area and region here, there's a lot of animals. And monkeys and baboons crossing the road, or could be cows and goats, or as Short pointed out, some skid marks on the road where a bus hit an elephant and 2 calves. And it killed 3 people. Not just the elephants, but 3 people on the bus. And so our goal was to arrive early and get back to town before it got dark. You just don't want to drive at dark. Short Mapande. I want to talk to you just a moment about Short. We arranged some time there where Short and I, where we rode together, just the 2 of us, so we could just talk about the work and talk about family and just share a little bit of time together. We're getting to be now long-term friends and have worked together many times in trips to Africa. I have just a tremendous amount of confidence in Short and his work and ability. This is where a lot of our brethren live, in places just like this. This is outside. This is in the village of Lukosi. And it's where Christopher Nudlovo lives. This is his house. And he is a preacher in that area and was a part of our classes and studies. And so it's very humble dwellings, Christopher does have a little house there that's built with a metal roof on it now, which is kind of a step up from the hut. And just some of the things around the maize, the corn crib. If you cook outside, you can have all your dishes outside too. This stand back here behind Christopher is where he preaches in Lukosi. Of course, he preaches at a number of places, but this is where our brethren are meeting today, or actually met this morning before us. They're 6 hours ahead of us. And this is where we had brethren meeting, is underneath this little stand right here. When we went to Lukosi, it was for the purpose of meeting with some brethren from 4 churches came and to meet so we could have one stop and spend the day. There was about 50 or so of us waiting underneath the tree for us to get there. And again, they were expecting us to come and to preach. And that's what we did. That's what we tried to do for the next several hours, Tad and I both having opportunity to preach. One of my interpreters there was a young man named Last Nudlovo. He's one of Christopher's sons. And as he was introducing his children to me again, started introducing him, this one here was first. And then he had a couple here, and then there was last. I get the inflection here. I get this is the last one, right? And so last now is about 19 or 20 years old, and he's extremely sharp and was able to qualify for a nursing school. And with a little help from some brethren individually, is being able to go to this school. And he wanted some private time with me to talk, and I was really encouraged by some things he said. As I said, he's very sharp, and in a place like Zimbabwe where there are few opportunities, Last may have some opportunities with his work being in nursing. But what he shared with me was when he gets done with this schooling, he wants to come back here. He wants to come back to his home village area and do some preaching. He hopes that maybe he can work in a clinic or something like that and come back and preach in some of these small churches. And I was just so encouraged by his enthusiasm for that and his willingness to do that. When so many are working to get out and to find something better in life, which is such a struggle there, that his focus and purpose was on spiritual things. And I just appreciate that about him so much. There's some other interesting things that happened there. Tad had his turn at preaching, and then after he was done, we're getting done or toward the end of our time there, and I was called on to speak again. And I wasn't surprised with that, really, but Tad took this picture of me, and we talked about it later when he shared it with me, and I said, you know, I think I'm being treated differently this time. And he said, yeah, I've noticed that too. And what he meant by that, and what I mean by that, is all that gray hair. I told you before about being called the old man, and that's a term used there that's differently than how it's sometimes used here. I mean, here someone might say, you know, my old man's just a real problem. And it's said in a derogatory kind of a way. But that's not how the phrase is used there. It has a different meaning. You know, and people would respond differently to that. You know, if there is a younger man sitting in a seat like this, and you know, Melphiletta comes walking in and there's no seats, he would immediately stand up and say, old man. And there's nothing untoward about that. It's meant in honor. It's respect. And nothing has to be said to prompt that. It's just understood. Now, I understand this, that's cultural. That's cultural. But I want to suggest that we need to be learning that and teaching that a little more. And it goes beyond just cultural for us. Because God has an order of these things too, that I think we need to know and understand the idea of respect for age. Like in this picture here, when we were eating, there's a man kind of sitting in the back of the picture there. He was an old man, and where the ladies were fixing food was a little distance away, and he never got up to go get his food. And another man or two there. Some of the other men went and brought it back to the old man. It was all about respect, is what that is. But God has some things to say about that too. Lessons learned. We think about what God said in this way: rise in the presence of the aged, show respect for the elderly, revere the Lord and your God. I am the Lord your God, he says in Leviticus 19. There's a principle there that I think we really need to understand, and we need to do something with. You know, we live in a day and in a society and a culture that shows little respect for age. And there's like everything wrong with that. But among our people, let's make sure that we're doing what we need to teach some things about honor and respect of those who are older. The Apostle Paul said it this way, to Timothy, to a young man, do not rebuke an older man, but exhort him as a father. The younger men as brothers, the older women as mothers, the younger as sisters, all with purity. It's an interesting exhortation, isn't it? It's all about giving honor and respect to those who are older. Or maybe this, likewise, you younger people, submit yourselves to your elders. Elders there, I don't think this is a reference to elders as in shepherds in the church. Previous in the context, yes. But there's a shift that's taken place here. It's talking about age. For younger people to demonstrate and show respect to those who are older. You know, that's not likely to happen if we're not teaching that. I don't know what's happened to yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. But it seems to be absent in much of our society. And too often our children want to do everything first. They want to be in front. They you know, maybe they need to back up. And maybe we need to demonstrate some honor and respect to those who are older. It's what God has said. Are we teaching our children about respect? Well, and then there's this. Gray hair is a crown of splendor. It is attained by a righteous life. Look, it's not just about having gray hair. There's more in this text. If I'm understanding this text at all, it's more than just having gray hair. I mean, best I can tell, that if you live long enough, you can get old. But age itself does not make one wise, it just makes one old. I think this text is talking about something different than just getting old. So far, I've been accomplishing that pretty well. But it's the other part. Gray hair is a crown of splendor. It is attained by a righteous life. If we want to grow old and have something to say of value that is going to help those who are younger, you have to work at that. That we have to have a focus on living a righteous life. You know, Ben talked to us last week about discernment. Great points made from this passage right here. Those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. It doesn't just happen that way. But there's work and effort that is involved. Those who have exercised their senses to have something of value to say. Exercise their senses in the Word is what the text is about. To live a righteous and godly life, but as well to have something to say. And that's what that text is more about right there. Enoch Nubi lived to be an old man. He was 90 years old when he passed away about a month ago. I had hoped to see him one more time, and I didn't get to. But I have good memories of him in my mind. What is most memorable about Enoch Nubi is not that he lived to be old, but was his character, his attitude, his nature. His gray hair was a crown of splendor because of his righteous life. And there were many among us, among brethren, who would go to him. He was in Zimbabwe. And would sit at his feet and would listen to his teaching because he was a sound student of Scripture. And he was a good preacher of righteousness. And he had gained this respect because of who he was, his devotion to God, his willingness to live a godly life. That's what I want us to do. And as we get older, I want us to have lived a life where we have learned to discern what is good and bad, what's evil and what's righteous, to be able to take those apart and to be able to demonstrate that in our lives and to be able to teach that to others. That's what I want. We close with this. I mentioned Fraser Chill a few minutes ago. Met him 4 years ago. He was our cook at this little place we were staying. We stayed there again. The cooking wasn't the same. I missed Fraser. But more importantly, through the years, we've been able to maintain some contact. When we were there before, he listened to some of our classes. He was not a Christian. He was not involved in any religious group. But he had an interest in the Bible. And through the years, he's been studying. There's been some contacts with him. And he came to our classes when we were in Livingston, Zambia. And got reacquainted with Christopher Lachaha, and they've been studying ever since we left. And Fraser was baptized Thursday night. And so, lessons learned again. Sometimes you don't know what a contact will lead to. Sometimes you don't know what answering some questions on Facebook will do over a period of time. Sometimes you don't know how interacting with someone leads them to someone else that can teach them the gospel even when you're gone, and how all of that can just work out. But what he was taught is the same thing that we can teach here because, the book is all the same. Regardless of what language it is, it's the same thing. It's the same story. It's the same lessons. Salvation is found the same way through Jesus Christ. His blood that has the power to cleanse us, to remove sins from us. That's what the story says. That's what Fraser was taught, and that's what we have to teach here too. And even today, if there is someone who is ready to become a child of God, being baptized into Jesus Christ for remission of sins, that opportunity is still being offered. And if you need to respond to the gospel in any way, we hope you will, even today. as we stand and sing this.